Hello everyone and welcome to A2i Dyslexia live show. It's a privilege to have you all join us this evening. What a beautiful day it is out there today, honestly. Probably had a garden, could have sat out there and done some work, but not to worry. I did go for my afternoon walk, which is absolutely beautiful. I believe summer's here. I'm sure it is here, and we'll all enjoy it. Now, welcome to everyone who's joined us. No matter where you've joined us from, I want to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, no matter where you've joined us from. We are in London, so it's evening for us. And I want to say thank you so much to everyone that does watch our live shows and all the comments that come through, and we hope that you're finding it very useful. I want to first of all thank our guest who's going to come on for his time and knowledge that he's going to share with us this evening. And I want to say a very, very big thank you to Yola, who is behind all this, who makes all this possible. She's absolutely phenomenal lady that she's got her own organization called Salt and Pepper Production, and she produces our podcasts and our live shows, and she's absolutely phenomenal and works with us in a very dyslexic friendly way, and we're very grateful for having her as part of our team at A2i Dyslexia. Now, I just want to say that today's live show is on dyslexia and rationality. Don't ask me what it means. Okay, I was trying to spell it earlier on, and it was a bit difficult for me, but I have the awesome, amazing Martin Bloomfield. If you are on LinkedIn and you follow dyslexia organizations and dyslexia information and so forth, you would have heard of Martin Bloomfield. He's the founder of Dyslexia Bytes, which is I think it's a YouTube channel, and he does a lot of images and talk about dyslexia and statistics and so forth. And he's absolutely phenomenal. But before I bring him on, I'd like to read a little bit about him. But before I do that, I want to say who I am. My name is Elizabeth Takyi, CEO of A2i Dyslexia CIC. We are based in London, and we talk about all things dyslexia. And today's title is Dyslexia and Rationality. Now, Martin, who is Martin? So Martin has worked in intercultural ethics, equality, and neurodiversity issues for 20 years. He holds visiting lectureship at universities in Britain, Germany, France, and Russia, trains educators and business people from around the EU, and is published in academic journals internationally. Martin runs the Dyslexia Bytes project while also completing his PhD in equality and ethics at University of York, and working on projects to provide an interculturally consistent measuring tools for dyslexia assessment across the EU. Martin has a lived experience of dyslexia. Now, I have to keep reading it to get it right. I got it right. Didn't stumble on one word. Well done to me. Right, Martin, welcome to A2i Dyslexia. Let's bring you onto the show and get
Elizabeth, that was absolutely brilliant. I couldn't have read it better myself. And in fact, as you were reading it, I thought, wow, I sound quite impressive. So I don't think, I hope I can live up to at least a little bit of that. Thank you very much for the introduction.
You're welcome, Martin. Martin, I've been following you on LinkedIn for quite some time now. And the work you do, it's just so phenomenal. And it's so amazing, particularly when you share things and it's more sort of visual and your statistics. And we recently did, well, quite a long time ago now, we did a live show on dyslexia and homelessness. And I think a week later, I saw some stats on what you shared. And I just think it's so amazing, the work you do, and having the lived experience of dyslexia as well. You're just such a phenomenal, inspirational person. And I think we feel really blessed to have you on our show this evening. Just please introduce yourself to our viewers. I know I've read a bit about you, but do say in your own words and why you're passionate doing the work you do.
Well, Elizabeth, thank you. And I'm going to say the same for you. I think that what you're doing is absolutely inspirational. I started off life not knowing I was dyslexic until I was 30. And I went through all the things that many dyslexic people went through. I went through that whole experience of school, which was alienating, it was humiliating, it was confusing, and it was frightening. And I look back on my school days, and actually sometimes when I do, I feel nauseous. I actually feel physically ill looking back on my school days. It's really funny. People who are friends from those days, I've got maybe 2 friends from school still who are close to me. They might say, oh, do you remember this school friend? Or do you remember this teacher? And I have no memory of it. It's as though there was a shock and it just blanked it out. And I lived through this, and I lived through not understanding why I didn't understand. and not understanding why I believed I wasn't stupid, even though my grades proved I was stupid. And I was told I was stupid by other people in school and by teachers. And then I went through the whole, I went through the whole unemployment. I went through periods of mental health difficulties. And I went through a long time of hopelessness, sorry. And actually, I mentioned homelessness. I didn't experience homelessness in that respect, but one of the manifestations of mental health problems that people with dyslexia have is self-harm. And I used to effectively self-harm by making myself homeless for limited periods. People wouldn't know where I'd gone, and they'd find me sleeping in a shop doorway for a few days, or in a public toilet or something. And there's this kind of this lived experience of the shame and the humiliation of being looked upon as stupid, not understanding why, and being put down every single day of your life. And as a child, these formative years, it's heartbreaking. And it's an absolute disgrace that this still continues. And so one of the things that Dyslexia Bytes does is I try through Dyslexia Bytes to raise awareness, and to raise awareness of the gravity of the situation, to take the idea that, yes, it is a phonological processing issue most of the time, but not all the time. No, it's not when words move around in front of your face. Yes, it can be about rapid naming, but there's so much more to it than that. And that's one of the reasons that I thought it would be interesting to talk about rationality today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Martin. As you were speaking, you know, certain things kind of resonate with me because I have been through that anxiety, difficulty, depressing moment where you hit rock bottom and you think, look, the only way is to look up and get up. You can't get any more lower than that. And you know, you work your way, you do it, and then you work your way to get to where you've got to now. And you know what, Martin, you've got to give a pat on your back and say, look, well done to me. You've got to really give yourself a pat on the back for that, because it's not an easy place to come from and to be where you are. Because I still have days where I feel sometimes quite hopeless, you know, in the things I'm trying to do and can't seem to do it. And if you don't have people around you who understand what dyslexia is like or what it's about, it can bring you back down to that memory lane. You know, it's something that sometimes you go back and you remember, you know, where you were at. Yeah.
There's a phenomenon called learned helplessness, and in 1967 or 1968, I forget which, a researcher called Seligman came up with the concept of learned helplessness. That if you begin by feeling that you can't do something, you quickly learn that you can't, and your inability to do something isn't based on your intelligence. It's based on this feeling that, oh, I'm not the sort of person who can do that. Now, when you say, and thank you very much, you say, oh, give yourself a pat on the back. It's very hard for people with dyslexia to get past that feeling of, I don't deserve this, to get past this feeling of, I'm not good enough for this. And it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter what you achieve. You carry that feeling of, I'm not good enough. You carry that feeling of, do I deserve this? Is this going to come crashing down around my ears? You carry that with you all your life, and this is a tragedy. Actually, it really is. And
I think I just want to second you on what you just said there, Martin, because sometimes if you're not careful and you're not strong enough, if you're not a strong enough person, you kind of feel a bit sort of bullied in a way, because you can't really get your, you know, you keep apologizing for things, and you keep sort of, oh, I'm really sorry, I can't spell, I'm really sorry, I can't do this. And you know, some people take advantage over that. They just think, well, she or he, it's quite stupid, and I'll just get, you know, I'll try to see how far I can push this person, so to speak. And you know, so you just got to be quite firm, and the firmer you become, the more sort of sometimes aggressive you seem, you know. Even though you don't mean it that way, you just want to protect your corner, and you want to make sure that, you know, you're not walked over, is the word I'm looking for, you know.
Well, Annette Briot once said that if you see something that appears to be sort of obstructive behavior, then when you find out the reasons for that obstructive behavior, 9 times out of 10, it won't make you angry, it'll break your heart. And that's what goes on. And so we need to be able to look at the person rather than simply the results or you know, whether they achieve at school or or whatever. But thank you. I appreciate the compliment. I really do.
Thank you so much, Martin. That's really amazing. Now, what is rationality? I was about to say nationality then, but it's not quite nationality, is it? It's rationality.
It's even harder to describe. What we do know is that the forms of rationality that we have are historically contingent. That is, the forms of rationality that we live through have been built up over generations and generations and generations. In the case of Britain, Europe, the United States, and these sort of what you call Western nations, even those such as Australia, which are sort of Western nations as well in that sense. They tend to come through things such as the Renaissance from the sort of 800 and something, and then there was another Renaissance in, I don't know, 1500 and something, and then we had the Enlightenment in the late 18th century, or the 18th century, late 17th into the 18th century, and these sort of social moments, if you like, gave us concepts such as rationality that we now have. Now, what's interesting is that not every country went through those moments. Different countries went through different moments. And so the kinds of ideas of rationality that we have are the kinds of ideas of how we structure our education system, and we structure our employment system. And in fact, our entire society is structured on rationality. And rationality is built on your brain operating in a certain way. Now, knowing on the one hand that the rationality that we have is not the only rationality that's available, and knowing that the rationality that we have tends to be given to us by, as it were, those people who are intellectually successful in our history. What it means is that those people like you and like me, who don't think in that standard way. Our brains are built differently. This is what neurodiversity means. Our brains are neurologically built differently. Our synapses don't point in the same direction as typical members of society. And when typical members, if you like, non-dyslexic, non-autistic members of society talk about rationality, what they effectively mean is there is a way to think. There is something called right thinking. There's something called thinking straight. But if you're dyslexic, you don't think in that way. If you're dyslexic, you have different forms of rationality, different ways of thinking. Here's an example, a very simple cartoonish example. So it's not what you'd call the deepest example in the world, but you can have a mathematician describe what time is using formulae and numbers. And this is what we would call in our society rationality. But then you might get something like a jazz musician expressing time on a saxophone. But that's not considered rationality, that's considered something else. But of course, that's just as valid a way of expressing time as the mathematician expressing it. But our schooling system, our education system, regards the mathematician's understanding of time as the correct one, and the jazz musician's understanding of time as, well, that's not rational. And if you try to get through school playing jazz effectively, you're going to fail. And if your brain is built differently, it's not built like the mathematician's brain, it's built like the jazz musician's brain, then you are considered non-rational, you're considered irrational, you're considered not thinking straight. Now, if a society is predicated on people thinking straight, and we who are dyslexic do not think straight, there is a systemic inequality factored in to the school system, to the education system, to the economy, to social practices, to absolutely everything, where we who think divergently are looked upon as somehow irrational, somehow not straight thinking. Now, just to give a little academic backing to this, if you like, just three names. There's a philosopher called Richard Bernstein. There is an anthropologist called Peter Winch, and there's a philosopher and civil rights activist called Cornel West. They each talk about, in their different ways, different forms of rationality. And it's not that one form of rationality is wrong. They're more pluralistic about it. And they say, well, look, that might be good, and that might be good, and that might be good. But if we restrict thinking in our schools to this narrow way of thinking, then we're leaving out, in fact, we're not leaving out, we're crushing those who don't think like that. And this is absolutely crucial to the way that we educate people.
Wow. Because it's really funny how you said that, actually, Martin. I don't think just like everybody else. I'm being really honest with you. It's like I'm on another planet completely. And it's like, you know, the ideas are just like, it's so phenomenal that people just don't get me. You know, they just don't understand where I'm coming from half of the time. Until most of the time, it's whatever I'm planning of doing has been executed. And then it's like, that's what she meant. Even in the way I describe things, if I'm trying to explain something to someone, it never comes out. I'll go all the way round about the circle and then get to the point. So it's like sometimes people just don't get it. But you are right. You know, as a dyslexic, my way of thinking is completely different to a non-dyslexic, and that can be misunderstood in so many different ways.
It can be, and it's really funny because the number of people I've met and I've recognized their dyslexia before they've read or written anything, because I recognize the way they think. And that's really interesting because you can see patterns in how dyslexic people think, and this is quite natural. So let's one of the sort of the analogies I give is I'll ask people to draw a brain, and when they draw the brain, I'll ask them to draw the brain out of triangles. So if you can make a brain and draw it out of triangles, and then I say, okay, now draw a brain and draw it out of squares. And then I say, okay, now join the corners of the triangles to the corners of the triangles in one brain, and join the corners of the squares to different corners of the squares in the other brain. Now, what this is it's a great little analogy for how our neural networks are built. Our neural networks are physical things. They're not metaphors. They're physical things within the physical brain, and the physical brain structure. And you'll notice that the directions of the lines that join the corners of the triangles to the corners of the triangles are different from the lines that join the directions of the line that join the corners of the squares to the corners of the squares. Now, if you can imagine that dyslexic brains develop differently, it's a developmental neurological condition. If dyslexic brains develop differently, then they're the brains made of triangles, whereas the non-dyslexic brains are the brains made of squares. These lines are the neural pathways within the dyslexic brain and the neural pathways within the non-dyslexic brain. They're pointing in different directions. In other words, they are processing information differently. In other words, they're thinking differently. And therefore, if we say once and for all, there is this way of thinking, that's called rationality. And if you don't think like that, you're irrational, bottom of the class. It's a bit like saying to, and I don't mean this to be an insensitive thing to say, but it's a bit like looking at somebody who's got mobility problems and say there's one way of moving and it's running upstairs. And if you can't do it, then you're wrong. And no one would think of saying that these days. No one would think of saying that. And yet we don't think twice about saying this is what rationality is.
Yeah, and of course, when it comes to dyslexia, it's not very well understood in different cultures, in the workplace and so forth. So there are many issues that come out of when people are not helped, or they've asked for help and they've not got it. I mean, sometimes you're even like disbelieved. You know, you might say to your boss, look, I've had dyslexia, and I've been at places where just before I set up A2i, and I've said I've got dyslexia, and I remember the person rolling their eyes up, and everyone's got dyslexia. And I'm like, what does that mean? What does that actually mean? You know, because, and then of course, you know, I've just got to. I'm one of these people. I'm quite persistent. Until I get what I want, I'm not stopping. You know, and I've always been like that. And I think that might be because I've, you know, always struggled to get things and explain myself quite well. Yeah. So thank you for that explanation, then, Martin.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. I was going to say that
honestly,
I work with
say
people
something.
all
Go
over
ahead.
the world. Yeah, I work with people all over the world, and you do notice different shifts in cultural attitudes towards dyslexia. And partly this is because of what the description of dyslexia is, but partly it's a social and cultural attitudinal sort of disposition towards dyslexia. And so in some parts of the world, they define dyslexia as a phonological processing deficit. Well, first of all, you've got that word deficit there, which is valuative and it's pathologizing. But okay, so even if we accept that dyslexia is a phonological processing deficit. In some parts of the world, the script that they read, the writing that they read, doesn't require your brain to phonologically process. Phonological processing is specific to a couple of different areas in the brain. And if you read, for instance, a logosyllabic script or a pictorial script, as it were, such as in Chinese, then your brain works differently. Different parts of your brain are operating when you read. So you don't have this phonological processing problem. Therefore, in those cultures, they are quite justified with that definition of dyslexia to say there aren't any dyslexics here, because no one's phonologically processing. Or there are no dyslexics until they reach a certain age and start to learn English or something. And this is a very strange way of looking at dyslexia, that you're not dyslexic until you start to read in one language or another language. It's a very strange way of looking at it. And there are other cultures who just say, look, you know, these children, let's say these children are broken. They have this very narrow view of what it is to think correctly and to learn correctly. And they look at dyslexic children. I come across it again and again and again. They talk about them as a problem. They talk about them as disabled. They talk about them as diseased, as ill. You hear this language over and over again. And all people want to do is somehow either mend the broken dyslexics or funnel them through an education system that's not suited to them, even though everybody knows it's not going to be successful. And so you get all sorts of levels of teachers getting stressed and getting angry with the children because the children can't perform in the way that the teachers want them to perform. And this is why we need to completely re-examine our notions of what it is to think straight, what it is to be a rational, intelligent human being.
Thank you so much for that, Martin. Now, I just want to welcome our viewers. I know we've gone into 20 minutes into the live show already. This is such an interesting topic that, you know, you and I could just talk forever, but I want to welcome our viewers.
Forever and ever, yeah.
Just want to welcome our viewers. If there's any questions out there, Mark Francis Long, hello from, I can't say that, is that Prague?
Prague.
Yes.
Prague, beautiful.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know how do you pronounce that, you know? It's got a G-U-E on the end.
Yeah.
I'm trying my best. Yeah. Hello, Mark Francis. Lovely to have you join us on our live show. So Linda Henson, hello from California. You were terrific. I've been called away unexpectedly. Right. Okay. Oh. Next one, if we've got any more comments that have come through. Michaela Tucker Blackford can totally relate to what Martin said. Thank you so much, Michaela, for joining us this evening, or wherever you are. You're in, I don't know, are you in California? No, we're not in California. I don't know where I got California from. But anyway, wherever you joined us from, thank you so much, Michaela. And of course, our, Yola, who's in the studio, can keep dropping these messages across. I think it's so amazing that we have people join us. And I want to really say a massive thank you to everybody that give their 45 minutes on a Monday evening to join our live show. And please do share, do like the program and share it with your friends and family. Keep resharing until we get the message through, because we are all here to make a huge difference in dyslexic people's life, no matter what color, what creed, or wherever we're from. We just want, it's at the end of the day, dyslexia is dyslexia, full stop. It doesn't matter where you're from. It affects us all, I know it affects us all differently, but it's still dyslexia, whichever way you look at it. And the more awareness we bring, the much better it will be for communities. So Marcia Bennett, I think in waves. Oh, wow. Waves. Now that's creative. That's very, very creative, isn't it? Wow. Now, it's funny, Martin, but I think in pictures. Everything is pictures. Even if someone sends me an email, I'm reading it, but I'm picturing pictures whilst I'm reading it. So Nessa, I get names wrong. And oh dear, Nessa, join the team. I get names wrong all the time. Things
like gender pronouns, they're very, very easy to get wrong, in the same way as left and right, in the same way as prepositions are easy to get wrong. These, what we might call salt and pepper words, they're really important, but they're small words, and they don't have, for instance, a morphological structure, for instance. And it's this idea of morphological structure that helps most dyslexic people piece together language. And these gender pronouns, he, she, they. In German, you've got, for instance, Studentin, Student, Studentinnen. I think I got that wrong, but they've now got new words to assign to different gender identities. And this is very difficult to get our heads around, because actually what happens is it's a little bit like trying to get your head around new mathematical concepts sometimes. And when we get this wrong, it's never a sign of disrespect to the people we're talking about. I totally get you. It's just that some things are hard to get right.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's great. I mean, you know, if you can just put back again for us what the message that Nessa put on there, because it's like names. I get names wrong, and that's embarrassing, and that's really embarrassing. I mean, I teach in sometimes in group sessions, and I remember when I finished my hair and makeup course, and I was working at a college in West London, and I always used to say to the students, please don't change your hair color, because if you come in one day and you've got different color hair, I'm not going to know who you are. You know, I kept calling Mary, and it just got all muddled up, and it can be very embarrassing. I got someone's gender pronouns wrong, and I feel really embarrassed and bad about it. I was concentrating so much to do it right. I had to ask one of my work colleagues. I thought, what is it? And I had to ask a work colleague so that I get it right. You know, and I thought, do I put, because I wanted to put something on my LinkedIn about gender pronouns, but I thought, you know what, I don't think I'll embark on it, because I don't really know what I'm doing. Whether I don't know what I'm going to be writing. I might get it all muddled up, but I do know what you mean. Yeah, Nessa, we're all in the same boat, and please don't feel embarrassed about it, because sometimes you can really beat yourself. You know, you really pinch yourself. You've got all that wrong, and that can stay with one a whole day. It can ruin your whole day. You know. I guess that's why I'm apologizing.
Yeah, especially now we live our lives on Zoom. I mean, I live my life on Zoom, and I give training sessions on Zoom, and have group meetings on Zoom, and project meetings on Zoom, and people move around the screen. So if you're like, maybe there are 3 people at the top of the screen and 4 people at the bottom of the screen, and then for some reason the order of the people move around, and suddenly if they don't have their names written underneath them, it's really hard to remember who they are, even people we know. And this, by the way, is something called rapid naming deficit. And again, this word deficit, but it's rapid naming. And it's that ability to go, okay, that's what it is. I remember that's what it is. And people with dyslexia tend to have something called rapid naming issues.
Right.
And with names, with remembering names as well, I can spell really well. Because I couldn't spell at all until I was about 16 or 17. I remember spelling the same word 3 or 4 times on a page, hoping that one of them might be right. Then when I got to about 16 or 17, I taught myself effectively etymology and morphology, really simple etymology, the roots of words, and really simple morphology. So the root word and the prefix and the suffix. And this allowed me to learn, and this allowed me to learn to spell. And there's some really interesting research that people who are dyslexic tend to understand meaning through morphology quicker than people who aren't dyslexic. And this explains one of the reasons that dyslexic people love morphology. But names don't have that morphological structure. And I can't remember names, and I can't spell names. Still, to this day, I struggle to spell my mum's name. I struggle to spell my brother's name. I struggle to spell any name you give me. And names are a classic.
But you know what's really strange, Martin? Someone would read your biography and they'll say, but you've got a PhD. You know, you should be able to spell Elizabeth, you know, for example.
I can't even spell PhD very well. So. But it's dyslexia, it really is, yeah. And this is one of the things that people will look at you and go, but you've got a PhD, as though it's a surprise that you've got a PhD and you're dyslexic. And by the way, thank you for looking into the future. I should have it by the end of July, so it should be a month's time. So it's very close.
That's really great. Well, thank you so much for that, Martin. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I just thought I'd go back to some of the messages, if there are a few more messages. Sorry to cut you like that, Martin. I just thought, you know, if we see a little bit more of the comments that are coming through. And the reason why I think it's really important to read the comments, it makes you feel like you are not alone. There are dyslexics out there that will be struggling with name. There are dyslexics out there that will think in waves. And there are dyslexics out there that, you know, will completely, you know, work completely different to a non-dyslexic. So if there are any more messages, of course, in our studio, please do drop them, comments rather than messages. And if there are any questions or anything as well, we'll be able to answer them live on A2i Dyslexia show. Now, if you've just joined us, we are speaking to Martin Bloomfield, who is the founder of Dyslexia Bytes. You can find Martin on LinkedIn, Twitter at Bytes Dyslexia, website www.dyslexiabytes.org, Facebook Dyslexia Bytes, and his stuff. The stuff that Martin work on is so imagery, and it's very, very picture based. I mean, I started thinking pictures, and I'm thinking pictures, and there was something recent that our producer Yola sent to me. So, oh, Elizabeth, have a look at this. And it was the tube map. Now, Martin, you must show this because it's so brilliant. If you can show your screen.
Now I'm going to work out how to share it. So
yeah.
Hopefully it won't simply share the the screen. So I'm sharing the screen, share screen, use Chrome. Okay, so start share. And what I'm going to do, and can you see that I've shared? Ah, no, here we go.
Yet.
Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the entire screen, allow, and then I'm going to share this. Can you see the Dyslexia Underground Tube Map?
No, I've come up instead on the screen. Maybe it's coming up.
I'm terrible at sharing screens.
There you go. We could see it a bit better.
I'm going to stop sharing. But what effectively, what it is, and I'll find a way of sharing. There's a button at the bottom that says share screen. Did I do it?
You did it. It wasn't. You did it.
I'm going to share it again, and then I'll walk people through it. And it's a really lovely thing. It's a really lovely thing. I really like the Dyslexia Tube Map. What we've got here, the underground map, and what it's there to do is it does a number of things. First of all,
there we go.
It takes something that's quite complex and simplifies it, just like the London Underground, just like the Tube Map. And it breaks dyslexia down into different parts. So into phonology, and then if you go along the phonological line, it explains it as translating written words into sounds, as working memory, and if you go along the written memory line, it translates it as applying short-term recall, and then all the way down to creativity, which is imagining new possibilities, material reasoning, which is manipulating ideas spatially, and they all join at visual thinking. And this Dyslexia Underground Map is an example of visual thinking. Now, one of the really interesting things about the map is that it does something really interesting called embedding. Now, embedding is a really key thing if we want to get our messages across to people with dyslexia. So the first thing is, what it does is it removes the need for literacy. The Dyslexia Map explains lots about dyslexia, but it's not filled with words. It's an image, it's pictorial. The next thing, of course, is that the message and the image are quite closely related. The idea that it's a cross section of different things, and it runs underneath you, and it's almost like the way that you think and your thoughts go along these lines. Well, there's something called embedding an image, and embedding a message in an image, and embedding an image in a message, having the image and the message closely aligned. And what this does is it accesses part of the brain, and it's part of the brain called the ventral pathway. Now, the ventral pathway is a fascinating part of the brain because what it does is it allows you to understand. It allows you to comprehend. Now, if we can effectively create images that have got the message embedded in the image, then we can allow people to understand, not just remember. Because so much of school is predicated on making children remember. When I was a kid, read, learn, and inwardly digest, they say, and then regurgitate it onto a page at the end. And if you could do that, if you could sort of take in information, hold it there, and then throw it back out onto the page, then that's what was learning. And of course, that's not learning. That's basically a memory exercise. It's no more learning than throwing a ball to somebody, where that ball is called knowledge. Someone throws you a ball of knowledge, you catch it, then you throw it back at them. Deep learning requires comprehension, it requires understanding. And actually, our schooling system doesn't often understand that. Our schooling system doesn't always gear itself to that. It gears itself to this linear, sequential way of, here's one piece of information, remember it. Now here's another, remember it. Now here's a third, remember it. And at the end of the school year, throw it all onto a piece of paper in the order in which I gave it to you. Well, if you're dyslexic, that's hard. That's really hard.
That is very
and
hard.
Giving us an extra half an hour in the exams won't allow us to do it better, by the way.
I agree with you, Martin. Wonderful. Now let's just go back to the studio. Is there any more messages for us, or any more what should I say, comments? You see, I could call them messages. They actually comment, don't they? So Martin, is it Griffin? Yeah, I think. Hello, Martin.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Martin. Good luck with your PhD proof. Viva Bloomers. Excellent.
Yes.
That's really absolutely amazing. If there are any more messages, just keep them coming. And thank you so much, Martin. Nessa said again, thank you so much. I wanted to apologize and explain that I am is that dyslexic? Yeah. But then it sounds like I am making excuses. Gender pronouns are really sensitive now. How do I handle this? Martin, that's a question. How do we handle this?
Very easy. By taking this word sensitive, and in one respect being very sensitive, and in another not being sensitive. And what I mean is very simple. So on the one hand, if, or perhaps in the modern world, when we know people who have got, who assign themselves or who identify with gender pronouns that are not normal, forgive me, that are not traditional gender pronouns, or gender pronouns that we perhaps haven't heard of before. And please forgive me for saying the word normal, it just came out. And it shows my old-fashioned nature that I'm still getting used to the modern world. If we know people whose gender pronouns are not traditional, if we know people whose gender pronouns are surprising to us, then we have to be sensitive to that, and we have to catch ourselves if we say what I just said and say something a little insensitive and realize that it's insensitive and try to stop that. On the other hand, being insensitive about it, this is a positive thing, is to say, look, someone's gender pronoun should be no more a taboo topic than somebody's hair color or somebody's place of birth or something along those lines. And if I forget what someone's place of birth is, I should just go, I'm sorry, I forgot, could you remind me? And we should just be very open about it and say, look, sometimes I forget things. It's not meant to be personal. I respect your choices. I respect who you are, and I'm not, as I say, I'm not being callous when I say something, but sometimes I forget things. I forget gender pronouns. That's true. I forget gender pronouns even when people are gender binary or non-gender fluid. I forget gender pronouns all the time. I forget to say Mr. or Mrs. or Miss or Ms. I forget to say doctor when I'm talking to professors, and this is just who I am. I sometimes do it. Please forgive me. It's nothing personal, and most people are going to be quite cool with that.
Yeah, and I would normally say that I've got dyslexia, and I've forgotten your name, and they've just told me their name less than a minute ago. What's your name again? So by the end of that meeting, it's like, what's your name again until we finish? And I will say, and then I do say I have dyslexia, and part of my dyslexia is retaining that information, what you've just said. And I will say, I've forgotten it. Can you just repeat that again? I'm not one of the easiest students to teach, by the way, because I'm constantly going, please, can you just say that again? And that's why I have my dictaphone to record it, and then I can listen back. Nessa, I hope that answers the question. If not, Martin, I don't know if you want to add more to that.
Just one other thing. Normally, Nessa, so this is really interesting. Now, I don't think at one point while answering the question, Nessa, have I even bothered to think what your gender pronoun is. Because most of the time when I talk to people, I don't refer to them by a gender pronoun. I just refer to them by their name, or not even that. And so most of the time, it's very understandable that we forget, because we forget all sorts of things. Most of the time, we don't need to use them as long as we respect who people are and we respect their identities. And as I say, when we do forget, most people will understand.
Yeah, thank you for that. And thank you for that. Let's hope that answers your question. If there are any more comments or question or anything, this is the moment to ask the amazing Martin Bloomfield all your dyslexia and rationality questions. That's today's topic, is dyslexia and rationality. I had to keep practicing that word until I got it right.
It's a tough one. It's a tough one.
It's rationality, then I kept going rationality, but eventually I got it right. So that is really awesome that I managed to pronounce that right without stumbling over it, which I know you do. Now
it's really interesting. It's really interesting, Elizabeth, because rationality and nationality are very closely linked. So let's refer back to this guy I talked about earlier on, Cornel West. He talks about effectively the rationality of the Western world has usurped the rationality of the Afro-American or the African-American people who came from or who were usurped themselves and stolen from different countries. They would have had lineages of rationality that are different from the Western version of rationality. And what happens is when we force our understanding of rationality onto a people we've already effectively kidnapped, then this is an act of cultural oppression. And it's a really important thing for us to realize that when we say things like racial inequality, we don't simply mean police officers killing innocent people in the street. We don't simply mean, as it were, we don't simply mean how many black people are rich and how many black people are poor. This isn't necessarily the inequality, it's the proof of the inequality. The inequality usually goes far deeper than that. And rationality is one of those pillars of inequality.
Thank you for that, Martin. Wonderful. If there are any questions or not query, you see, getting on my lap now. Query, there's no query there. Questions or comments, do drop them, and please do share. Do invite your friends, share and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And of course, we're on Facebook. At the moment, we're on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, and we're broadcasting live with A2i Dyslexia, all things dyslexia. Today's topic is dyslexia and rationality. Now, Martin, I have to ask you this question. When you gave the introduction, sorry, I've just got to read another Martin Griffin's message. Neurodiversity and dyslexia are I can't say, is that considered
a hidden disability. One way around gender pronouns for people like us could be in introducing disability passports. There is this idea of a lanyard, a dyslexia lanyard, for instance, and that's some people are quite happy with that, and those people who might not be happy don't have to wear them, and there can be a good discussion about them. And I think this idea of having a discussion is a great idea. I think a dyslexia lanyard is something
that's quite a good idea.
Is a great topic. Yeah,
absolutely.
And by the way, a lot of the time as well, a lot of the time we talk about gender pronouns is one thing we get wrong. Another thing that there's a lot of sensitivity about, and I would like to argue that there shouldn't be, is how we refer to dyslexia. So I'm dyslexic, I have dyslexia. I'm a dyslexic person. I'm a person with dyslexia. Which one is right? Which one is wrong? Well, I think as long as we respect people's choices and we celebrate the diversity of people expressing themselves differently, then that's the way forward. But of course, as long as they respect that we might forget sometimes, then that's, so it's basically about mutual understanding and keeping the dialogue open.
Of course, I had to stick my dyslexia glasses on because words were moving all over the place. And I just thought, right, I've got to follow the words, and that's part of my visual stress. And of course, my glasses have to go on. Martin, it's really important that I speak to you about, when you gave your introduction, you spoke about self-harming when you were younger. Now, what message would you have for a young person who is going through, self-harming or depression or anxiety? And it's not even a young person, I'm sure, a youth or somebody who is going through this at the moment and at a breaking point. What message would you have for that individual?
Well, first of all, please, there's no shame in it, and there's no shame in seeking help. There are people out there. There are, for instance, the Samaritans or Mind. There are local charities. There are, if you're so inclined, there are churches. These people are there for us. These people are there to help. Seek friends and sensitive friends, not those friends who see you self-harm and put you down, or depending on what kind of self-harm it is. It could be excessive drinking. I went through periods of excessive drinking, and I look back on that time and think, were the friends that I had really friends? They were encouraging it. They were making it worse. And so on the one hand, there's no shame in speaking about this. But another thing that we know, and this is really interesting, we know from a number of pieces of research that the way that we understand our dyslexia actually has a measurable effect on how we then behave in the world. It has a measurable effect on our academic outcomes. It has a measurable effect on our mental health outcomes as well. The University of Birmingham published something quite recently that spoke to a lot of high-achieving dyslexic students and some less high-achieving dyslexic students. And they found a correlation between, on the one hand, the way that you label the dyslexia, the way that you see yourself, and on the other hand, mental health outcomes, anxiety outcomes, educational success outcomes. Now, the 4 ways that they saw dyslexia can be categorized as follows. This is really interesting. Number 1, as a patient. They called it the patient. And that is, dyslexia is a medical or a neurological condition. Number 2, as the student. And that is, dyslexia is a learning difficulty, a difficulty in remembering, a difficulty in reading. Number 3, as the hemispherist. And that is somebody who says, well, dyslexia is simply a different way of thinking because it's a different neurology. And number 4, as the campaigner. This is somebody who sees dyslexia as a political struggle against a system that is geared against us. Now, what we know is that those people who look at dyslexia as hemispherists or campaigners have better mental health outcomes, better learning outcomes than those people who look at dyslexia as patients or students. So if we have a negative view of dyslexia, then this brings forward negative consequences. So one of the things that we need to try to do is maybe find groups of dyslexic people, find networks, and try to build a more positive of what dyslexia is, and to try to understand the struggles that we have had in the past, because we've all shared them. I can guarantee we've all shared them. The struggles that we've had in the past, we can understand that there's a shared experience of these struggles, but that actually it doesn't mean that we are the ones who are unable to read or unable to learn. It could be that there is a society that is structured in such a way that it effectively discriminates against us. Or it could be that it's not that we can't read or can't learn, it's that we read and learn differently. And these are the campaigners and the hemispherists who look at themselves like that.
Awesome. What a lovely way to end the program. We have come to the end of it. I want to say thank you to everybody. But just before we go, let's just go back into the studio and see if there are any comments that have been sort of dropped or typed and given to us. So if there are any, please do drop it. Richard Hall, good evening. You have a great evening and week. Keep safe and well, strong with all your friends and family. Thank you, Richard. I follow Richard on LinkedIn. Thank you so much.
He's a great man. Yeah.
And if there are any more messages, please do drop them for us. And of course, if there isn't any, then we'd have to say goodbye. We have 1 minute to go. And Martin, just before we go, give me one last top tip for somebody who's really going through struggles, either at work, either in education or in their personal life. Because I always say that dyslexia does not just affect us in the classroom, it can have a huge impact on your life in general. Give us one top tip for creating a more inclusive society for our viewers, our listeners with dyslexia and neurodiversity. Heather says, very educational. Thank you for these conversations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, I would suggest, thank you, Heather. I'd suggest build a social network and reach out to people. Don't close them off. Don't categorize ourselves as different from other people. Categorize ourselves as part of a diverse community. And if we can do that, if we can reach out to others, the chances of them reaching out and connecting with us are far higher than if we simply say, we are this, you are that, you're the problem. If we start doing that, then we're gonna make things a little bit worse. So I would begin with love and I would end with love. And I know that sounds like a bit of a hippie thing to say, but I genuinely would.
Thank you so much, Martin. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you to our viewers for joining us this evening. No matter where you joined us from, we just want to say a massive thank you. Thank you to everybody who makes this show possible. Thank you, Janet, for your message. Janet Morgan dropped a lovely message there. We feel so grateful and so, I just think, Martin, how you think is how I think. I'm like, you know what, I feel so privileged and so grateful to be able to have this voice and this platform to reach many homes for people that need the support, people that need the advice. Someone just might have been diagnosed not long ago and think, what do I do? Where do I go? What is all this about? And I wish there was a platform like this 20, 30 years ago when, maybe when we were growing up, somewhere you can go and just listen. Yeah.
what Heather's just said here, love, I think that's really important, and we should shower it on you, Elizabeth, because what you're doing is an amazing thing. It really is, and I am privileged to be talking to you, really.
Thank you so much. And I just want to say, I don't do it by myself. Just me won't work. There's a team of us that will make it possible. Yeah. So, you know, credit to everybody in the A2i team, as well as all the viewers and yourself, Martin, for the great work you're doing. Please do connect with Martin on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Twitter. Do look at some of the work that Martin does. It's really phenomenal. And they're quite dyslexic friendly as well, you know, especially on Dyslexia Bytes. When I go on there and I watch some of the videos that you do. Now, it brings us to the end of the show. We want to say thank you to everybody. We'll see you next week, same time, same place. Martin, please don't go. Stay in the studio for me and we'll catch up. But want to say goodbye to everybody. So thank you, everyone. See you next week, same time, same place, with a different topic. Next week will be a phenomenal live show, and it is our last show until September. We have to have a break and give it a season, because it's all seasonal that we do this. So it will be a last show, but please do remember to tune, because it's a very special person who's coming live to talk about her experience with dyslexia. It will blow your mind away. And I just want to say that it would be great if you can join us and listen to her lived experience with dyslexia. I don't want to give too much away, but all I want to say is I'll see you next week, same time, same place. Bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.